Daniel, today reading chapters 4 to 6, which is essential understanding and reading for understanding, speaking in tongues of the New Testament and Paul's writings, especially the word interpretation. Listen, or for those reading it, the below summary account, taking note of the emphasized words, then read the commentary at the end. Those listening will not hear the emphasized words or interpretation, tell me, I told, and so forth. But those who are reading it would see I've highlighted those words for you. Read from chapter 4, verse 1, Nebuchadnezzar praises God.
Chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar the king, unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high God hath wrought toward me. How great are his signs, and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in mine house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore made I a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. Then came in the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers, and I told the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But at the last Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And before him I told the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret troubleth thee. Tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen, and the interpretation thereof.
So Daniel was asked to do two things, to tell the dream and the interpretation. Continuing from verse 17. After the king has explained the dream to Daniel, and also he did that to previous people. Verse 17.
And let 7 times pass over him. This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now thou, O Belteshazzar, declare the interpretation thereof, for as much as all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known unto me the interpretation, but thou art able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in thee.
Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him. The king spake and said,
Belteshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation thereof trouble thee.
Belteshazzar answered and said,
My lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies. The tree that thou sawest, which grew and was strong, whose height reached unto the heaven, and the sight thereof to all the earth, whose leaves were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and upon whose branches the fowls of the heaven had their habitation. It is thou, O king, that art grown and become strong. For thy greatness is grown and reacheth unto heaven, and thy dominion to the end of the earth. And whereas the king saw a watcher and an holy one coming down from heaven, and saying, Hew the tree down and destroy it, yet leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass, in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which is come upon my lord the king.
So what do we learn about that for our study, which is about what is needed for salvation? Part of which is not being deceived or following traditions of men, studying to make ourselves approved and rightly dividing the word of truth, as we are told in Luke chapters 21 verse 8, 2 Corinthians 11:14 and 2 Timothy chapters 2:15. We should note from the above and from Genesis chapters 41:15 which reads, And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. Also in Daniel chapters 5 verse 12 below it says, For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and showing the hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belshazzar. Now let Daniel be called and let him show the interpretation. So from those examples, we should know that to interpret is not to translate one sound or language into another, but to explain the significance of the vision or the story, the parable, the same language as spoken and heard. In both accounts of Joseph and Daniel, everyone, magicians, kings and so forth, spoke the same language, explained the same event. But only Joseph and Daniel were able to interpret the meaning of that event. In other accounts of Joseph, in Genesis chapters 37 verse 8 and 40 verse 8, as with the above examples, we read the dreams and visions were explained and able to be understood by everyone who heard, or the prisoners in Joseph's case, or magicians as the case in Daniel. They understood the language spoken but did not know what prophecy it was stating. Joseph and Daniel were able to do both, hear and I repeat, and interpret, which means to explain the meaning. This they did in the same language as they and everyone heard, so that when the event came true, all will be able to testify of their true ability. All heard, were given the answer, and saw the final event. Similar to in Deuteronomy chapters 13, 18 verse 22, Ezekiel 13:3, and Matthew 7:22, where a sign of a true prophet is one that can, in advance, tell of a future event in the language for all to understand, so that when the event happens, they are their own witnesses, without having to rely on a third person. The event of Acts 2, where the 12 apostles at the most spoke and the audience heard, is used today to justify speaking in tongues of unknown human languages to hearers, either in a congregation or other. This is an inherited belief started in 1900 by Charles Parham, spelled P-A-R-H-A-M, and Agnes Ozman, O-Z-M-A-H. Search the internet for the history to save me going into it here. The event of Acts 2 was a prophesied event in Joel chapters 2:28, Isaiah chapters 44 verse 3, Ezekiel 11 verse 19, and 36 verse 27, and other places, purely to enable the message of the prophesied Messiah to Israel, the 12 tribes, coming and ascending to be preached to the Jews. I say not just one tribe of Judah, but to the 12 tribes, who had many other native languages, as we saw in Acts chapters 2 verse 9 to 11, they were scattered among other nations and came from other nations to the feast of Pentecost. Any teaching of Paul must have a foundation in the Old Testament. Nowhere in the Old Testament is there a prophecy that every believer will speak in foreign human languages. Paul is actually rebuking those in Corinthians for bringing their pagan ways of babbling into the congregation. He states in 1 Corinthians chapters 14 verse 27, If any man speak in an unknown tongue, let it be by 2, or at the most by 3, and by course, and let one interpret. Now that one means one of the speakers, not any other person, just like Joseph and Daniel. Continuing from verse 22 of 1 Corinthians 14. Wherefore tongues are for a sign, not to them that believe, but to them that believe not. Verse 13. Wherefore let him that speaketh in an unknown tongue pray that he may interpret. Verse 9. So likewise you, except you utter by the tongue words easy to be understood, how shall it be known what is spoken? For you shall speak into the air. Verse 15. What is it then? I will pray with the Spirit, and I will pray with the understanding also. I will sing with the Spirit, and I will sing with the understanding also. Thus when thou shalt bless with the Spirit, how shall he that occupieth the room of the unlearned say Amen at thy giving thanks, seeing he understandeth not what thou sayest? So they must understand, because it must be words easy for them to understand. Now the word unknown is an inserted word by the Bible writers in an attempt to aid the reader's understanding. It should be taken out of a sentence. In the King James Version, it is in italics, meaning this kind of writing slanted to the right. And it's normally greyed out, so a different colour, shade of black than the normal word. Basically, no, it's an inserted word. But in other versions, they have not notified the reader by this indication. They read it as if there's such a thing as an unknown tongue. A summary of what Paul said is that 1. Tongues are not for believers, so should not be used among them, i.e. in church. All 3 occasions in the New Testament where tongues were used had unbelievers. For example, in Acts chapters 2, those coming from around the world to the day of Pentecost were not believers in the Messiah. They had not known about him. They weren't there at his crucifixion and so forth. So they did not know nor believe in Messiah until explained by Peter. Then 3,000 got baptized. With Cornelius in Acts chapters 10, where Peter went to Cornelius, the Jews, the Bible calls uncircumcised, who accompanied Peter, did not believe Gentiles should be accepted. Yes, until Peter explained his dream on the rooftop, and they went by what Peter said, because he saw the same sign, things will happen to them, and that was accepted. And the last and third version is when Paul baptized some of John the Baptist's disciples, and some prophesied and some spoke in tongues. 2. Paul says that no more than 2 persons should speak and one of the speakers should also be able to interpret, in other words, explain what they just said. Just like Joseph and Daniel, who were able to do both. This point is confirmed in verses 9, 15 and 16. Just like Nebuchadnezzar thought that Daniel had the spirit of his gods, speaking in the babbling tongues of today is also a sign of being possessed by such false gods, I'm sorry to say. Matthew 6 verse 7. But when you pray, use not vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. 2 Timothy chapters 2 verse 16. But shun profane and vain babblings, for they will increase unto more ungodliness. So we do not see such things in things of God, or the disciples of God. Those who speak in tongues of today are ignorant of its history, professing and possessing the same spirit of a heathen who wants to be like a god and have a self-professed ability. 1 Corinthians chapter 14 verse 26. How is it then, brethren, when you come together, every one of you have a psalm, have a doctrine, have a tongue, have a revelation, have an interpretation? Let all things be done unto edifying. 14:28. But if there be no interpreter, let him keep silence. So let him keep silence in the church, and let him speak to himself and to God. We do not need non-intelligible sounds to speak to each other, and definitely not to speak to God, who reads hearts. Verse 26 says, speak to God in silence. He reads hearts. 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 14. Be you not unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness, and what communion have light with darkness, and what concord hath Christ with Belial? Or what part hath he that believeth with an infidel? 2 Corinthians chapter 6:16. And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For you are the temple of the living God. As God hath said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. 2 Corinthians 6:17. Wherefore come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith Yahweh, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. We are warned not to have fellowship with unbelievers, those who do not believe the truth, nor worship God in spirit and truth. Association can be a snare that sooner or later may cause us to lose our eternal soul. Now that does not mean we cannot mix with them socially, but not in things of God. Hosea chapter 4 verse 6 says, people perish for lack of knowledge. Seek knowledge, especially historical of tongues, and do not be deceived with traditions started of men in the 19th century. For future studies, see sermons or study articles, one titled, Who Gets the Holy Spirit and Why? Another one titled, Acts 1-2, Holy Spirit and Tongues. And a topic titled, Speaking in Tongues, is a chapter in a book called, Have I Got It Right, God? All of those sermons and articles and the book is available to download on www.forwardtoyahweh.com. The book, Have I Got It Right, God, being on the ebooks page. Okay, continuing with Daniel chapters 5 verse 1, handwriting on the wall.
Chapter 5. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold, and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake, and said to the wise men of Babylon,
Whosoever shall read this writing, and show me the interpretation thereof, shall be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom.
Continuing from verse 11, where the queen recommends Daniel.
There is a man in thy kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and in the days of thy father light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him. Whom the king Nebuchadnezzar thy father, the king, I say, thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. Forasmuch as an excellent spirit, and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams, and showing of hard sentences, and dissolving of doubts, were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation.
Continuing from verse 16, Daniel interprets the handwriting.
And I have heard of thee, that thou canst make interpretations, and dissolve doubts. Now, if thou canst read the writing, and to make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom.
Continuing from verse 22.
And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven. And they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives and thy concubines have drunk wine in them. And thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know. hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, tekel, upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians.
Then commanded Belshazzar.
And verse 30.
In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. And Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old.
So as we see, as is the principle established above, Daniel was able to do both read and explain, meaning to interpret what the words were saying. And it's similar when you hear words in the language and someone does not know what it means, you explain it. So drivers who know road signs can read a road sign and interpret what it means. A non-driver can see the same road sign but may not understand what it means because they are not a driver. Okay? Saying like H2O, which I think is a formula for water or so. Everyone can read what it says, but only a scientist or someone learned would know how to interpret that sign and what it means. That is what interpretation is. It does not mean to translate it into another language.
So as is the principle established above, Daniel was able to do both read and interpret, which means explain the dream that was told to him by the king. Now this is a change of the empires from Babylon to Medes and Persians, as in the statue of Daniel, the head of gold to the chest of silver. The Persians did this by diverting the river Euphrates, which flowed under the wall protecting the city, diverted it so the river bed went dried, and they then entered the city through under the wall. They crept in by night. History says that Belshazzar reigned in the place of his father King Nabonidus while he was on an archaeological expedition in Arabia. That is why this king could only offer Daniel a third of the kingdom in chapters 5 verse 16. Nebuchadnezzar is called Belshazzar's father, though he was his grandfather in Jeremiah chapters 27 verse 7. Lastly, just a side note, in Ezekiel chapters 20, we see that Mina equals 50 shekels, Tekel is 1 shekel, and Euphorim is half of a mina, which is 25 shekels. You can read about that in Ezekiel chapters 20. Last chapter for today, chapter 6.
Chapter 6. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault, forasmuch as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then said these men,
We shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God.
Continuing from verse 10, where they conspire against Daniel, try and catch him out. They got the king to sign a decree where they set up some new law that anyone who didn't obey it would be thrown into lines of death. The king, in ignorance, signed a law, and then he realized his error. Carry on, as I said, from verse 10.
Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day, and prayed, and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. Then these men assembled, and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Then they came near, and spake before the king concerning the king's decree.
Hast thou not signed a decree, that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions?
The king answered and said,
The thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not.
Then answered they and said before the king,
That Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day.
Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Then these men assembled unto the king, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Then these men assembled unto the king, and said unto the king,
Know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persians is, that no decree nor statute which the king establisheth may be changed.
Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel, and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel,
Thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee.
And a stone was brought, and laid upon the mouth of the den. And the king sealed it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace, and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. Then the king arose very early in the morning, and went in haste unto the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said to Daniel,
O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions?
Then said Daniel unto the king,
O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt.
Then was the king exceeding glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. And the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives. And the lions had the mastery of them, and brake all their bones in pieces wherever they came at the bottom of the den. Then King Darius wrote unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth,
Peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree, that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. He delivereth and rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions.
So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius, and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian.
Some points to note. 30 days is the length of a month for biblical calculations. For example, in Daniel chapters 8:14, which says unto 2,300 days, I think. And then you convert that to number of years. King's laws cannot be changed, as in Esther chapters 8 verse 8. So neither does Yahweh, God's law, changes. If God could have changed his law to accomplish what he wanted, he would have done so and not sent his son. He changes not. He is the same yesterday, today and forever. So he keeps the same law, the same system. What we have in the Messiah is simply a better sacrifice through him rather for repented sins rather than through the sacrifices of animals. Shalom until tomorrow, God willing.